One of Cuphead's arguably most important factors when it comes to the difficulty or challenge of a boss is the hitboxes and hurtboxes themselves, or lack thereof, during certain phases. So let's go around the aisles and check some of the bosses out and see what's going on with them during the boss fight. The first thing you'll notice during Ruby and Crooks' fight is that both their hitboxes are active, meaning they will flicker to show you that you're indeed hitting them. But what's hidden from you is that Crooks actually doesn't take any damage from you no matter what until you pass into the second phase, even though his hitbox is quote-unquote active. This is the first example of just because your shots are being registered does not mean you're dealing damage to the boss. And this happens again when you deal enough damage in the second phase. Once your damage starts bleeding into the last phase, you essentially deal no damage until they fully enter their last phase and you spin the slot machine. But you're still able to farm EX cards even though they take no damage, so shooting is still worth it. This also happens for another boss on Aisle 1, which is during Hildeberg's last phase. During her transition to her last phase, she will still flicker to show that shots are indeed hitting her and are being registered, but you will deal no damage to her even when she's almost done with her transition, and you even have to wait until a little bit after before you can deal damage to her again. So take this time to farm EX cards to spam them or for your super. There are also some quite interesting mechanics on Aisle 2, first one being during Jimmy the Great's fight. Jimmy is known to have the most amount of phases and one of the longest fights in the game, which makes getting through him a slog. So cutting down the time it takes to beat him can be very helpful to a lot of people, especially those that like to speedrun each boss. Luckily, how Jimmy's phases work actually helps us get past one particular phase faster than normal if you use this trick. During Jimmy's second phase, you'll have to traverse through columns of pillars, shooting the ones with faces to get through each section. Then after, you'll face Jimmy in a sarcophagus and you'll have to shoot his slug of a body until he eventually hops away. These seem like two completely different phases, but what if I were to tell you that these are the exact same phase? Yes, not only are both these parts considered the same phase, but you can actually deal more damage to get past the sarcophagus by destroying as many of the face pillars as possible. And we're not done yet, because depending on how you destroy each face pillar, you'll be dealing even more damage to a sarcophagus phase. The most optimal strategy to get past both parts of this phase as fast as possible is to shoot 4 pea shooter shots, which then gets the face pillar's HP as low as it can go, then shooting one bomb destroys the pillar and carries the extra damage over to the second part of this phase. Do this to every pillar you can, and you'll get past the sarcophagus faster than ever before. Luckily, things are not as complicated for most other bosses, so let's go over some even more niche tricks and mechanics the game has. Going back to Hildeberg's last phase, we now know that we should be saving up her cards for after her transformation is fully completed to get the most out of them. But that's only half the story for why you should definitely save your cards for this phase. Preferably, you'd save up to just below 5 EX cards so we can utilize Pea Shooter EX rather than using the plain super. When Hildeberg does her signature attack, she sticks her head out of her body and summons colored UFOs to trip you up during her grueling long phase. But what if I were to tell you could upwards of triple, no, quadruple your damage because of those UFOs? As you've probably seen, her hitbox extends forward before the UFOs start coming out, and those UFOs also hover through her hitbox before being sent towards you. You will also notice UFOs have hitboxes, even though they're normally something you never shoot at intentionally. If you've now put together that means we can actually deal damage to these UFOs, then you'd be half correct, because that also means EX shots will register on the UFO and thus slow down and freeze for a moment before repeating until it moves through the entire hitbox. Presumably, the combination of both Hildeberg's and the UFO's hitboxes allows well-placed EXs to stick inside Hildeberg for much longer, allowing the EX to chomp over and over again, continuously dealing massive amounts of damage with one use of an EX. If you master this, you could make her typically long last phase one of the shortest phases in the entire game. And a small bonus tip for another plain boss, Wally Warbles' last phase also has an odd quirk about it. Right after beating Wally's son, Willy Warbles, pausing and unpausing the game for some reason skips the time between the phase transitions and immediately starts bringing up Wally's body, giving you a head start on his last phase. And as the cherry on top, when Wally moves to the right side of the screen, this is your opportunity to spam EXs in the bottom left side of the screen to deal the most damage possible. You might think Aisle 3 doesn't have much to offer since I haven't brought it up yet, but it actually has some of the most hidden mechanics out of all the aisles. To start out simple, Sally has some minor things you should keep in mind when fighting her. Firstly, her transition to her second phase works similarly to Hildeberg's transition to her last phase. When Sally's health enters her second phase, she'll cease to take any damage for a very long time, even while she's sliding on the ground, even while she's pointing her finger, and only after she's completely done gesturing is when she starts officially taking damage again. So sadly, there is no real reason to stack damage with weapons like Roundabout unless you want to farm EX cards or you want to feel cool. Another funny quirk, which is really just a bug, is that you can skip her second phase by triggering her to go into her secret phases and beating her first phase within a very short amount of time between each other. This takes you straight to her third phase with her god husband and child, which makes it harder than her normal third phase, but you save a ton of time if you're looking to speedrun boss fights. Lastly, dealing damage to Sally's god form during her transition to her last phase apparently directly deals damage to her last phase, so still shooting Sally here is recommended to make her last phase even shorter than it normally is. Then next you have Calamaria, which has a lot of unique stuff about her boss fight, but one hidden thing about her boss fight in particular is that you can cheese her last phase with some good spacing and movement skills. When she enters her last phase, you can fly right next to her head, getting eerily close to her, like she's practically breathing down your neck, and staying here can allow you to dodge literally all of her attacks. The only issue is dealing with the spike columns that float around the stage, so you'll need to pay close attention to the right side of the screen and move accordingly. Getting good at this honestly makes it so much easier to beat Calamaria without having to deal with her petrification BS in the awkward skull movement. There are also some quite interesting hidden things during boss fights throughout the Isles, and mainly throughout the late part of the game. The most interesting and practical examples are with both Rumor Honeybottoms and the Devil. If we zoom out of most boss fights in Cuphead, you'll see there is a lot of stuff placed outside the play area in order for the game to use those assets and sprites later on in the fight, and sometimes we can use that outside knowledge to our advantage to deal damage when least expected. Zooming out shows us that her last phase plane sprite is loaded underneath the screen blocked by some invisible wall, which should prevent us from interacting with it even if we tried, but they must have forgotten something about how Pea Shooter's EX works, because it can go straight through this wall and damage her. Yes, you can literally spam Pea Shooter EX from the middle of the screen downwards, and you'll essentially get the same value as if you hit her hitbox that's in the play area. For whatever reason, Pea Shooter's EX goes straight through some ground platforms during some boss fights, and this is proven again during Beppy's fight. At any point before Beppy's last phase, you can spam Pea Shooter EXs downwards from the middle of the screen and you will damage him. There is one last unconventional situation where you can deal damage to a boss off screen, and that would be during the fall to the Devil's second phase. Oddly enough, the Devil's big head for after the first phase is always loaded in off screen down below. If you know what you're doing, you can fall down during the transition and hit a perfect EX shot, preferably spread EX, when falling through his eye, letting you get early damage in and lowering your time to beat him ever so slightly. Obviously this takes a massive amount of skill, luck, and is pretty much as niche as you can get, but the fact that this is possible is quite funny. We've gone over a lot of the broken mechanics of Cuphead, so let's have a lightning round of funny ways the game works in the background, as well as some small hidden details you might not know about. Starting with a small hidden mechanic, it's been found out on the root pack that for whatever reason, the first piece of damage that Ollibulb takes during his phase deals absolutely no damage no matter what. You can shoot a Pea Shooter shot, a Lobber EX, a charge shot, a tactical nuke of damage for crying out loud as your first shot against him, and he will be completely unscathed like the tank he is. It's very odd this is how this phase begins, but that doesn't stop him from being the easiest phase to beat in the game. Now sadly, the DLC patches out most hidden sprites and assets outside the play area, but that doesn't mean we can't find any quirks when zooming out. Interestingly enough, some attacks during boss fights rely on the perspective of the camera to determine how the attack functions, so if we mess with the perspective of the camera in any way, we immediately see how these attacks go from working to being completely dysfunctional and off the play area. Namely, you have Glumstone's gnomes during his last phase, Mortimer's popsicle bats, the fireballs during Saltbaker's fight, and Saltbaker himself during his last phase. Since we're talking about the DLC, I might as well add that Mortimer has 2 hitboxes for a short amount of time during his transition to his second phase, which makes EXs like Roundabout and Twist Up deal tons more damage. Most of these mechanics have been about how bosses work or function during their fights, but I haven't necessarily said anything about you as the player and how you work. That is what's most important since you can always influence the game. So here are some hidden mechanics and the bugs about you that you can utilize during your next Cuphead run. To start with the basics, your hitbox is a little bit weirder than you might think. Your normal hitbox is seemingly normal, covering the important parts of your character, and your crouched hitbox lowers and shortens since you're smaller. But when you dash, it surprisingly takes the same crouching hitbox and slaps it onto your dashing animation, meaning your hitbox is more displaced than your body suggests. This makes dashing over obstacles ever so slightly trickier. Let's level up to some more interesting mechanics and bugs we can use. There's a trick called bullet displacement that, well, displaces your shots and EX recoil and is used for more intricate speedrunner tricks. Simply dash, and while in the dashing animation, move in the opposite direction for your shots to start coming from behind you, and when you EX, you actually recoil forward rather than backwards. Sadly, moving or looking behind you fixes the displacement. We can pair this with another trick called ninja clipping, which allows you to clip or phase through most walls. All you need to do is look in the opposite direction of the wall, use an EX, and jump at the exact same time, performing a frame-perfect move for your character's EX recoil to phase you through the wall partially, and then quickly move in that direction to fully phase through or into that wall. And you can do both bullet displacement and ninja clipping together, which I personally call ninja displacement, to first dash right next to a wall while doing bullet displacement, displacing your shots and EX recoil, then jump and EX at the same time to perform the ninja clip and phase yourself towards and through the wall, rather than having to turn around and perform the trick that way. This is mainly used to save time during speedruns while clipping through walls, and can prove really useful for skipping entire sections of running guns if you're doing pacifist or speedrunning yourself. You might think those tricks are too niche for your taste, so let's step up to a whole new level of hidden mechanics. Let's start off with the Luigi swap. Yes, called Luigi swap, you can shoot and EX at the exact same time during plane levels with some precise button presses. Switch to the opposite weapon you want to shoot an EX of, so select bombs if you want to use plane pea shooter EX, and then while shooting bombs, switch to plane pea shooter and EX at the exact same time to perform this trick. This will let you keep shooting while you're EXing, essentially increasing your DPS like crazy since EXs normally prevent you from shooting during their animation. And another neat trick is to perform the Luigi swap, which is again switching weapons and EXing at the same time, and during the EX animation, simply stop holding the shoot button. This bugs the game out and makes you continue shooting even though you're not holding the shoot button, so if you want to be lazy like me, it makes playing a bit more comfortable, and pressing the shoot button again cancels this. So this trick can pretty much double your damage if you perform it right for plane bosses. And what's great is that you can do this on normal bosses as well. Going to the Calava swap, it's the same principle as Luigi swapping. This time, use the weapon you want to EX with, then press the EX button and quickly press the swap button 2 times before the EX comes out. This lets you shoot the EX and continue shooting the weapon at the same time. You'll know you did this optimally if your shot follows your EX, almost hugging it for weapons like Lobber or Pea Shooter. So again, this heavily increases your DPS when you perform it right, but unfortunately, this is a much harder and more precise trick to perform than Luigi swapping. But if you get the hang of it, this is how speedrunners can deal so much damage and skip entire phases during boss fights.